Welcome to You Can Trust Yourself with Meg and Maggie. Nothing feels as good as listening to your own voice, and each week we have conversations to help you do just that. Get comfy, grab your favorite fun drink, and let's dive into this week's episode.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. We are never recording in the morning, I feel like, Maggie, but we are here bright and early this morning to bring you an episode. I'm so sorry that we missed last week. It was really, I had the flu and it nearly took me out, let me say. It did take me out. I'm not even going to say nearly took me out. It did a number on me. It took me out. So we apologize for not having an episode for you last week, but we are back. We are ready to dive in. And today we're bringing you a morning episode that's going to be more vulnerable in nature. We're talking about something that I think a lot of you will be able to relate to in terms of trusting ourselves in relationships, close relationships, intimate relationships, how that can be quite the challenge amongst the ones closest to us, and kind of the unique dynamics and challenges that brings when we are in close relationship to those still trying to trust ourselves. So Maggie, I've missed you so much.
I've missed you too.
I know, it's too long. 2 weeks too long.
Well, we usually FaceTime for a couple minutes before we record. So you called me and I was like, oh, it's Megan. She's back.
I know. I'm here. If my voice sounds weird, everyone, it's just going to sound weird. That's where we're at. I'm really excited to get into this episode. Maggie, do you have a fun drink today? I know we haven't done a fun drink in a minute, but
I know, it's crazy. I actually just have my water right now. I wanted to wake up a little bit earlier, and if I did wake up a little bit earlier, I'd probably have some caffeine, but we're still in water time of day.
I love it. I'm in water time too, but at least our mugs are we're really aesthetic.
Very
Hydro
cute.
Jug, come talk to us. We love our tumblers. I have the cream one and Maggie has the blue if you're watching on YouTube. Your cup matches my headphones and it's a great aesthetic we have going on.
It is. It really is.
I'm going to be chugging this water the whole time. It seems like as I talk, I cough. That's just how it goes with the flu. So bear with us, everybody. But Maggie, I'm excited for today's episode. You want to share a little bit about what we're going to get into, or maybe just get us into it?
Yeah. So I think we're going to talk about a couple different things, but all within the main topic of trusting ourselves when it comes to, like you said, being in close relationships with others, right? So we talked briefly before this, and our experiences and things we want to share are a little bit different from one another, but I think both of them are equally as relatable, because when we are in such close relationships with other people, we can kind of get meshed together a little bit, and that's beautiful. And there's so many great parts about that. And at the same time, we are still individuals, right? And so it's important that we don't forget that. And we, over the course of time, I feel like this is just a lifelong journey of learning how to bridge those two things and merge them together beautifully in a way that has the balance that works for each individual person. I don't think that's something that we learn and then we're perfect at it, but it's something that we do have to work at, because it's really easy to, I think, fall one way or the other, where we're hyper independent, or we kind of lose ourselves a little bit.
That's so, we used to talk about that so much, of that all or nothing, that one extreme or the other that is so easy to fall into. The word that you said that really stuck with me when we think about relationships that are super close and, sometimes intimate in nature, sometimes not, but just really close knit, that word mesh, mesh together. I remember I was seeing a therapist in college, and it was when I had to start to learn a little more about when you go away to school and usually get out of your family of origin, you're like, oh shit, my family had some stuff going on, right? No matter what, you could have had a really well-adjusted childhood. I'm sure there's still something or another that you were like, wait a second, I didn't realize that other people didn't have this. And I was seeing a therapist at the time, and me, my mom, and my brother were very much so in the therapy world. They call it enmeshed, which is like an enmeshed family system, which is, I'm not going to go into like the details of what it means, but it basically is like you're almost the enmeshment, you're kind of intertwined in ways that can be unhealthy at times too. And so that word meshed is like, we have to be open and aware of closeness is beautiful. We as humans love to be close to other humans. It's what breeds connection,
Hmm.
right? And there is such a thing as, okay, we're overlapping into territory that's not really us as an individual. And it's something to be mindful of because it can create dynamics that can be really tricky to work through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've all experienced this in at least one relationship in our life. But if you have experienced it in one, chances are you've probably experienced it in more than one. And yeah, it's just something that, the more we can be aware of it and learn more about ourselves and learn to trust ourselves, right? That's why we're here. The more we can enjoy our relationships. And that's really
Hmm.
what it comes down to. It's like, I want to have the best experience all the time that I can, right? And so let's try to do that. I'm really curious if you would like to start, Meg, to hear about why you kind of brought this topic to the table and what specifically you were thinking about in terms of, trusting yourself in close relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when Maggie, when we were messaging, like, okay, let's try and, the flu is kind of behind me. Let's get through this. You were like, what do you want to talk about this week? And I was like, this feels relevant and something that I want to share because it's an area of my life that I oftentimes have to, like many areas of my life, I have to continuously go back in, if you will, or I have to maintain this aspect of myself. And so, full disclosure, I think it happened and started in, which oftentimes many things do, in childhood for me. I grew up mainly with my mom. She was primarily a single mom with me and my brother. So that created a very firm, beautiful, warm, loving environment for me as a child. It really, truly did. Like, I'm extremely grateful for that. And it also created some codependency of who am I outside of you guys, right? Because when you're so, so close and you're really with three people for the ins and outs of life and you're in a very close knit group, it can be really beautiful. And it also has to be kind of kept in check in some ways because what can oftentimes happen is we will feel like, I'm okay if you're okay, right? So
Oh
that,
my gosh.
yes, yes, it's resonating with you, Maggie.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to share a little bit and then I can keep going with it?
Yeah, I think I definitely identify with that of I'm okay if you're okay. There's different attachment styles, right? I definitely find myself a little bit more anxiously attached, which means like I want to like dig down to the bottom of the problem and like get, and resolve
Mm-hmm.
everything as quickly as possible. Where some people are a little more avoidant, they're kind of just like go
Mm-hmm.
away and come back when they're good, right? But I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not good. If you're not good, if you're not good, I'm not good.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's this like slightly frantic energy around it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's not necessarily a problem, right? It's not a problem to feel that way, but it's a problem if it like takes over, right? And so I think that's why I relate to that so much because that's something that I've had to work on tremendously is like it's okay for other people to not be okay and they're going to process it in whatever way that they're going to process it and I can't make it mean anything about me.
Mm, my gosh, that is, I think, beyond relatable. Like, I think the trustees listening are, how have we not experienced that at some point, right? It's typical. Some will find it in their family of origin, others will find it in romantic relationships, especially when we're younger. It can be a very common thing that we fall into of like, I'm going to be okay if you're okay. And the problem with that is that we as humans all are going to go through different seasons where we're not okay.
Yep.
And to try and be on the same wavelength as others is automatically kind of setting us up for failure
It
in
is.
a lot of ways. And so that was a lot of how I grew up. And I found a lot of security in that though too. So it's a very tricky the world of enmeshment, if you will, or a meshed relationship is it's hard because it's like, wait, this feels so beautiful. How could this be a bad thing? Right? And it's not necessarily, I don't even want to use the words good or bad. It's just something that has to be navigated when you are in a place where you want to be able to trust yourself and recognize that you are individuals within a system or a family or whatever it may be. So, fast forward to my life now at 27, all of that is really, really beautiful. And in fact, still reality for me to this day. I'm very close with my brother, very close with my mom, too close with my mom because we live with her while we save up for our first home. And so I find that when things are really, really good, they're really, really good, right? Between my family, we are like thick as thieves, do anything for anybody. And that's always the case. However, when things are in conflict, which naturally is going to happen because we're human beings with different minds, of course, we're going to get in arguments. Of course, we're going to find conflict. It gets really, really bad. And it's a constant check in of like, whoa, I find myself, I'm just going to speak for me and not so much like the others in my family, but I will find myself feeling like I can't walk away from this argument until we're all good. But the problem is that everybody's going to get good in their own way, in their own time. But for me and my internal is like, no, 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 I can't move on. I can't go to bed. Tell me you love me. We're gonna, and that's very real. I find that coming out in close relationships with me, and it's something I have to keep a pulse on and remember that like you love them, they love you, and you're not responsible for everybody feeling better right when you want them to feel better, Meg.
That's the ticket right there.
Mm,
You're not responsible for it, right? And I think that that is a really great mindset to be in. It's obviously not 100% true all the time because sometimes we are responsible. Sometimes we are rude. Sometimes we are mean. Sometimes our actions do directly impact the other person and they were unkind. And that is our responsibility to some extent,
sure.
right? But in most situations, conflict happens not necessarily because of us, but we're just all part of it, right? And like you're saying, we can't take on everybody's responsibility for their own selves, right? We can only be responsible for our own self, and everybody has to be responsible for their own self. And then that's how we can all like remember who we are as
Mm.
individuals, right? And that's so challenging when you're used to either somebody doing that for you, right? And then therefore you don't learn how to do it, or you learn how to do that for other people, right? Or we're just like constantly worried about everyone else.
Yes. I wish that could be a bumper sticker. You are responsible for your own self.
Yeah.
Let's make it one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, Maggie, when you said that, sometimes then we learn somebody kind of does it for us. So we don't necessarily learn that critical developmental skill. Like, do you have experience with that? Or do you know, like, can you speak more to how that can look for the listeners who are listening who are like, yeah, I think I didn't necessarily develop that skill and I want to now?
Yeah. So for me personally, I'm the opposite. I am the take care of everyone skill over skilled skill. um, yeah. So I'm the opposite of that. So I am not personally an expert in that situation, but I have seen it. And when you're coaching people, you can kind of tell who has what sort of coping mechanisms and who doesn't, right? And so if I feel like it kind of comes across as like this is a harsher way to put it, but I also think that it is real is a little bit of like a victim mentality, right? Where everything is always happening to me, right? Everything is always happening to me, and I don't have control over anything that's going on, right? It's
Hmm.
always like this person's fault or this thing happened or whatever. And when we get into that mindset, I mean, I get into that mindset sometimes. It's not my default setting, but I'm there sometimes for sure.
Hmm.
And I think that if we can recognize ourselves being there, or have someone that really cares about us be able to point it out, it can help us recognize that, oh, maybe this is a situation where I have to look at my part in this,
Mm.
right? And what I can do to change my reality, because I'm the only one that can, right? I'm the
Mm.
only one that can 100% control what I do, and therefore, like, hopefully get closer to a desired outcome, right? But
Mm.
if we always give our power away to everyone else and we're just waiting for someone else to fix it, then we're never going to experience anything close to a life that we actually would want to live, because we're just always waiting for someone else to give it to us, you know?
Mm.
So I think that I think it's important that we reflect and, self-reflect and look at ourselves in different situations and say, how did I respond there? How did I react? And was I waiting for someone else to kind of save me?
That is, that's the stuff. Like, that's wow, because it's so interesting, and I'm going to try and explain it the best I can as I hear Maggie say this. Um, Makes my little therapist in training heart happy, because I subscribe. I've mentioned this before. I use a lot of parts work with my clients. IFS is a lot of it. And we can take that as ourselves, as individuals, as parts, right? Self in the center, where a lot of that trust has to develop. And then we have all these parts of ourselves. And we can also take that to, in some ways, family systems, right? We're all a part in something. And what you're sharing, Maggie, of if we're always waiting for others, whatever it may be, insert any word of choice, validation, others' opinion, others' thoughts, comments, guidance, wisdom, blessing, whatever it may be, we are never going to be able to lean into that self trust more. But the thing is that life brings up challenges where we're going to have to at some point,
Yep.
right? It is beautiful to have community and to have relationships and to have people that we can literally melt into. Because I don't know how to do this life in a fully independent way, nor do I want to try and find out, right? And at the same time, there are many things that we have to do alone. And a lot of the work of self growth and becoming humans who are working through things and trying to improve and living a life that we have designed, it requires you to do a lot of that work on your own, because it's only something that you can do. And when we talk about, you can trust yourself, I want all of you listening to know that, like, you can trust yourself. And in these relationships, which we're going to kind of get a little more into now of how it can look, or I'm going to share a little bit too, of how it can really look and almost shadow over our ability to do that from time to time, and how we can kind of navigate through that. So, Maggie, I'm curious for you. When you think of being able to, like, stay in tune with you and with Maggie, is there anything that comes to your mind, like, right off the bat, that you're like, this is a necessity when I'm in relationship with others to keep me in tune with my own trust, my own sense of self-trust?
Ooh, this is something that, talk about actively working on all of the time. But I have learned some things up until this point, so I will share them. I, first of all, really like that visual of like the cloud cover that you just talked about. And that's kind of how I feel when I realize that I maybe am not trusting myself is that I've had to learn that this is not a forever scenario. It's like the cloud just came over and the cloud will go away, right? And the sun will come back out again. I will trust myself again. It will all it will all be there. So I just wanted to say that first because that has always been something that has really helped me. That was the first like visual when I started meditation that really helped me with like the thoughts. Just watch the clouds pass by, and the thoughts are the clouds passing by. And I really like apply that to all situations because it helps me get a little bit less frantic about something being the way it is forever, right? So in relationship, when I realize that I am not trusting myself enough, like listening to my own guidance, the things that I know are true for me, it's usually because I'm not spending enough time by myself. Um, I really value alone time and quietness. And quietness doesn't necessarily mean like perfectly quiet, right? It just means the ability for my mind to kind of process, right? So I could still be like watching a show, listening to a podcast, listening to music, like any of that, that still like falls into the category of alone time to me because I don't have to respond to what I'm taking in. So either it's like quiet or like just music or something like that, or I can be like learning something, but my own mind is getting the time to process things. And when I have that, that's when I have like those like light bulb moments or things click or I realize what I truly want, right? And so that is one thing that I know that I need. And the other thing that I know that I need, which we actually talked about on the last episode, is a pause, right? And so I know for me, I get really excited when other people are really excited. Like if you're
Mm.
really excited about something, I'm going to get really excited about it. And then sometimes I don't know if I was excited or if you were excited. Because I was
Mm.
excited because you were excited, and I don't know if I'm also excited or if I'm just excited because you're excited. So I need a pause because otherwise I end up like committing to things or thinking that ideas or excitements are mine when in reality they were someone else's, usually my husband, love him. And then, but it wasn't actually what I wanted. Right. So I feel like those two things, they kind of go together. They're kind of one and the same, but they are slightly different.
Yes. That it made me think, okay, so when you were saying like, I don't know if I'm excited because you're excited or if I'm actually excited. I don't know why. Probably because you have the sweetest, happiest doggies over there of like it made me think of the dogs of like
Yes.
I'm excited. They are the most like okay, let's get weird for a second. Our dogs, right? Our loving, beautiful, fluffy lovers. That's a weird way to put it. Our little lovies. They are so excited if we're excited. Think about it. They're the
Yes.
most codependent things on the planet. If you say park in a high pitched voice or oh, you want a treat, our excitement is contagious to them. And it kind of makes me think of us as humans too, that like we want to feel excited. Excitement is one of the best feelings in the world. I tend to be, as Glennon Doyle says, skited a lot of times. I tend to be a scared and excited human.
Okay. I
Um,
haven't heard that one.
no, yeah, skited, I've learned is like kind of my default. I'm always like, let's do this, and I'm terrified all at the same time.
Okay. Roller
It's kind
coaster
of a mix.
vibes.
Yeah, which is, we're working on it.
Okay.
And, but it makes me think of that in relation to other people of it can be contagious, right? We want some of that. And there's quote unquote nothing wrong with it. And except then, like what you're saying, Maggie, I've now just committed to something or made a decision or maybe made a big decision while going off of the energy of someone else.
Yep.
We can live our whole freaking lives that way if we are not in tune with our own self trust.
Yep.
We can go through an entire lifetime like that.
Yeah. It's really easy to, especially if the people that you're around are like high energy doers. It's really easy to do that. And honestly, I don't think all of us are meant to like lead, you know what I mean? And like be the idea person. And so it's not a big deal for like most of life, especially if you think of like work, right? Like you might have a job where someone else is steering the ship and you do your role, and that's really, really important. And you don't have to
Mhm.
really think about like, would I make this decision? You know, like there's situations in life where it's not as, important that we trust
Mhm.
ourselves 24/7. But when it comes to the parts of life that are our life, it is
Yes.
important. And it's important when we're making big and little decisions for our own life. And I really relate to that. Um, Idea of how easy it could be to just follow someone else, which is really interesting to me because I never used to be that person. So like I said,
Mm.
I was the like hyper aware, take care of everybody else problem solver, and I still am that person. And my husband is so excited all the time. And so it's so easy for me to just like be like, wow, this is the greatest idea ever. And usually, like, lots of them are like, yeah, I'm on board, let's go. And sometimes they're not.
Mm.
And it's important that I still have that ability and use it to decipher what is right for me and what's not. Because otherwise, like you're saying, it is really easy to just get sucked into following someone else, especially if they're very
Mhm.
charismatic. And we love very charismatic people,
Mhm.
and they're very fun and exciting to be around. And they're making decisions for them.
Yes.
And we have to make decisions
Yes.
for us.
Yes. That we have to, they are making decisions for them, and we have to make decisions for us. It makes me think, as weird as this is, it makes me think like a lot of the quote unquote, I say this very lightly, great like cult leaders are the most charismatic, energetic humans
We'll
of
have
all
to do
time.
another conversation about that. Yeah.
Me too. Let's do it. This is our morning version. Let's do an after dark
The
episode.
after dark. Yes, that would be amazing. But that is very true. And um it's very easy for people like that to create an environment in which you want to follow. And there are a lot of times where that can be really great. And we just all have to discern for ourselves. There's going to be
Yes.
parts of things, regardless of what it is. You join a new workout program, okay? You join a new gym. You join any sort of group, there's going to be parts of it where you're all in. You're like, yes, I love this. And there's going to be parts where you say, um, actually, that one part is not for me. And it's okay
Yes.
for you to
Mm.
say that that one part is not for you. Or maybe the whole thing's not for you, but you have to be able to discern.
Yes. I can you share I have always when I first learned the phrase discernment, I was very like, yeah, that's I was younger and I was like, wait, yeah, that's what I'm working on. I don't know what it is exactly, but what they're describing is what I'm working on. I find that to be I remember thinking this. I was younger. I was like 21 maybe, and then I was starting to listen to like podcasts and all the things, and I was like, that's the stuff I'm trying to get good at. So when you think of discernment, and some people say like the gift of discernment or the ability to nurture that, like what does that mean to you?
What does it mean to me? Okay, so I, as I've been told recently by my husband, my brain works in a very like scientific method type of way. We
Mm.
had a discovery about this recently where he is very much just like throwing stuff at the wall and seeing if it sticks. And I'm like, let's change one variable at a time and see what the cause was. And so when I think of discernment, I'm thinking about like, okay, I'm looking at this whole picture of something and I want to pull it all apart. Like I want to pull all the pieces apart, right? And I want to see them all individually. I want to see them in little groups. And then I want to see them all together, right? And for
Mm.
me, it's kind of this process of like, let me pick all of this apart and be able to see it, like look at it, right? And then use some critical thinking skills, right? And I'm asking myself different types of questions depending on the different situations. But like, what does this mean? Why did they do this? How would this affect me? Like, would this work for me? Does this
Mm,
align with my goals, right? Like, does this help me get closer to what it is that I'm trying to create within my own life, right? And then when you can match those things up, kind of like a matching game, you're like, this one relates to
mm,
this one relates to this part is a yes, this part is a no, then it's easier for me to look at something as a whole and decide, yes, that's for me. No, that's not for me. Right.
mm,
But when I try to, and this is just me personally, when I try to make a decision about something and I'm just looking at it from far away as a whole, I usually make the wrong decision
mm,
because there's usually one part of something that overrides the others. And when you're looking at it as a whole, it might be overwhelmingly positive, which could lead you to say yes, or it might be overwhelmingly negative, which could lead you to say no, when in reality, that thing actually wouldn't play as big of a role as it looks like it would. So
mm,
that's kind of how I view it because it helps me kind of take the emotions out a little bit, right? Like when I'm making decisions about something, I actually don't want to be emotional because
mm.
when I'm emotional, that state is not going to stick around where the facts are, right? And
Sure.
so if I make a decision based off of an emotion, I'm probably going to end up disappointed.
Hmm. That's something that I think so many listening can relate to. And it's something that we are so, easily, I mean, think about the world that we live in, right? Especially if you live in the US, like think about the society that we live in. Everything that is quote unquote sold to us is based on very, very smart people who have studied that if they can capture an emotion from us or elicit an emotion from us, then they can have our money, right? And
Exactly.
I know that's a very like I'm really condensing it down, but a lot of the nuts and bolts like that's a lot of how our capitalist society works. And
Yeah.
people have become extremely good at doing that. And it is something that when I think of discernment, like you were saying, I'm going to share a little bit about it. For me, it is something that is necessary in order to remember that we are able to make decisions for ourselves and not based on what insert any X, uh, anything that applies. Insert any box that applies.
Yeah.
Relationships, the new gym, the new workout, the new product, the new iPhone, the new whatever it may be, right? That ability, and like we talked about last episode, and you really, I feel like, are a master at, Maggie, is the pause. That's where the pause is critical, to take a moment with ourselves and be able, however that looks for you. For you, Maggie, it sounds, and I love hearing about that, like the scientific method part of it. Like that's your process, right?
Hmm.
My process is different. Mine is more of one that has to be in stillness and in myself and alone, right? But it's usually just a clearing for me. It's kind of like if I want to get weird with analogies, it's kind of like a meadow that's just cleared a little bit, right? Like the chaos subsides and I have a clearing in the woods where Meg is and can make the next decision. And the factors that are critical to that a lot of times are what we talked about 2 weeks ago, which is our P's, right? The critical pause, being present. Go back and listen to that episode if you didn't hear it, because that'll really tell you more about how we kind of navigate that. But I'm curious, Maggie, when we think about relationships, and I'm going to share something soon too, but when we think about self trust within relationships, do you find that? I know you mentioned a little bit about Kaz and how he's so energetic. Do you find it in other relationships too, sometimes a little tricky to navigate?
Definitely. I think for me, I'm kind of like reflecting a little bit in the moment. Um, each relationship is different for me, I feel like. Or, yes, that's true. And some of them are more similar, but I don't think I really have another one that is similar to my relationship with Cause. Like my relationship with him is pretty different than any of my relationships when it comes to self-trust with other people. I would say that when it comes to my family, and not just my mom and my sister, but my mom's family, like my extended family, I would say my relationship around self trust with all of them is pretty similar, which makes sense because, like, I grew up with all of them, right? And so I formed beliefs as a young child. And my relationship with self trust with Cosmos is different than it is with them. Um, I think that they're both they both have their challenges and their challenges are different. So, like what I was saying with Cosmos, my challenge in my relationship with him when it comes to trusting myself is like not getting overly excited about things and like being able to get overly excited about something but not necessarily make a decision in that state, right? And so that's the learning there. Um with the rest of my family, it's not so much that. Um, I think with the rest of my family, I'm actually one of the more excited ones. And so they might feel that way about me. I don't know. They might. With them, I think it's more of trusting that my crazy idea is not that crazy. Where for him, it's like recognizing that his crazy idea is beautiful and maybe is not for me. I feel like they might be having that experience with me where they're like, wow, her
Mm,
crazy idea is cool for her and not for me, right?
yeah.
So, but like still having the trust and confidence to like share those things with the people that care about me because
Hmm.
sometimes I can feel doubtful of myself if I'm doing something different than people that
Mm,
I'm close with.
yeah.
And I don't do everything different from them, but there are a lot of things that I do
Mm,
differently. And I feel that way about some of my friends too. And reminding myself that these people love me and they love me because of who I am, right? So
mhm,
when I'm hiding those things or I'm not trusting that I'm making the right decision for me and I'm not trusting that they're still going to love me when I share it with them, that's when that's I think the biggest struggle for me
mm.
is realizing that it's safe to share all of the things about me with the people that I know that truly care about me.
Yes. It's so it's beautiful what you shared, and I'm so sorry everybody. I ran away for a second to blow my nose. I'm feeling all
It's middle
the
of the episode and it all
yeah,
came out.
middle of the episode need to blow my nose. Um it's a beautiful thing, and it's interesting. I used it this week actually in a session with a client where it was just a reframe, like a basic reframe technique of, can I trust myself enough to know that whatever their reaction is, right? And it's this question that we can ask ourselves. So here you go, everybody. Here's a technique that you can use, that I use on myself, that my clients use and take, is asking yourself that question and knowing that the answer might not be the answer you're hoping to get towards, but it can be really a valid one in relationships of, can I trust myself enough to know that my friend might think this about me, right? Or can I trust that a lot of people will get, if any of you listening, struggle, which who doesn't from time to time, but if you struggle a lot with wondering, like, oh no, what are they going to think about me, right? Or if I send this text message, did they think I was being mean? Or when we kind of get in that overthinking pattern, it can be a really great reframe for you to have that, can I trust that this person who I know and love and have a relationship with, can I trust that they will tell me if I upset them? Right? So that's where it comes to the responsibility of all of us as individuals of, if someone upsets us and it wasn't just like an in passing thing, it left a mark in some ways, or we just want to communicate it, we have to trust ourselves enough to communicate that. we have to do that in relationship with others, or else it can build into feeling resentment, or feeling like you're in this questioning place, or it can taint a relationship sometimes too. And so that little technique can be used both ways. But I want to share a little bit about, for me, what really had me needing to develop more of a sense of identity for myself as an individual, because I have been very fortunate to grow up in a very, like I said, close knit, but also a meshed family. And I've also been blessed with the most amazing friends, right? Like, I'm looking over at Maggie, and like, our relationship, like co-hosts aside, is so beautiful. And it's one of my only relationships that is truly, it almost sets the precedent, and it might make me emotional. It sets the it sets the standard of, oh, it can be like this. It can be like this. I can have a friendship that is based off of two individuals who have love and respect for one another, and who are on this journey, a separate journey, of trying to become the best version of humans as they possibly can, right? That is a really, really big blessing. You're sweet, Maggie. I love seeing you get emotional.
Oh, you're sweet too.
It's a special thing. And so, what I want to share now is that in those relationships, it can feel oftentimes like we're so blessed to have them, right? And so supported. And that is a feeling in and of itself. And at times when we go through things, external forces can come into our life. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about an external force that not only came into my life, but really took over my life. And it's one that I'm going to give you a tiny bit of like psychoeducation, just so you all can understand a little bit. We all have different ways that our brains kind of work or adapt, or have, been shaped in some ways. And for me, I've always run on the more anxious side, right? I just always have. And a lot of that has to do with childhood and different things. And the why doesn't matter so much. It is. It just is. I've always run a little more on the anxious side. But my anxiety, there's different ways that our anxiety can show up. And mine was really geared more towards a place of being in this loop oftentimes that I just couldn't get out of. And I didn't understand what it was. And I had no words for it, which is crazy because I was still in mental health. And it's like, I just didn't know. It's hard to look at ourselves sometimes. That's why, therapists need therapists, and people in mental health, we need our own people for our own well-being. And for me, I found myself in a really dark, hard place. And that is when I was diagnosed with OCD, which, as soon as I was diagnosed with it and my therapist told me more, I was like, wow, I think a lot of the reason why I never thought of it for myself is because a lot of times OCD is portrayed in the media as washing your hands multiple times, or, always checking the light bulb, making sure that the light switch is off. And that is something that, sure, can be a compulsion for some, but it's not the majority for those who have OCD and who are diagnosed with OCD. And so for so long, I did not adapt or recognize that that is what was happening for me and my experience. And my therapist at the time, when she started, telling me more, I was like, yeah, like, wow, that diagnosis fits. Like, that is where I am. And so during that time, I didn't know anyone else who had been diagnosed with that. A lot of the treatment of OCD is hard, and let alone getting a diagnosis or treatment can be extremely hard to find. And a lot of people who have OCD are diagnosed much later in life because nobody catches that that's how your brain is kind of showing up, and the ways that anxiety can kind of get caught in this cycle and this loop. And it can be a torturous, horrible way of living without treatment and without some help. And I was very fortunate to have a therapist who knew enough. And the part that I want to share that's very real, and it's not to shame anyone around me. The problem that occurred when I was diagnosed is that I was the strongest person I knew for the most part. And if I didn't have a therapist who was so knowledgeable and awesome, I don't know how that would have worked out for me. Because in my family system, none of that was known or discussed. And in some ways, I won't go into too many details, but many people were like, you don't have that. That's not you. And that can be a feeling in and of itself when you're like, no, this diagnosis really does fit. And if I'm saying it fits and I'm a very conservative diagnosis person, that means it fits. And so I remember feeling very scared and alone during that time a lot. And I remember thinking and looking at relationships, right, in my life and thinking they all have scared eyes because they don't know how to help me, right? And that was one of the hardest experiences of my life was looking around at the relationships in my life and being like, oh my gosh, they're all scared. And if they're all scared, that means I'm in trouble now, right? And so if that's you and you're in a place like that, it only takes one set of non-scared eyes to look at you like my therapist did and say, no, this is what it is. And it's going to be okay. And there's help for this. And there's ways through this. And we're going to help you through that. And I'm so, so grateful to that because it only took those eyes to make me like, okay, I'm going to trust that I will be able to get through this. And that's the thing with relationships is that they're so powerful. And there are things that we have to do alone. And oftentimes we have to reach on someone or people or a group who can help us move a little bit more through what we're going through than maybe our own normal quote unquote group can help us through.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I am certain that people, whether or not they relate to a diagnosis, definitely relate, I know I do, to expecting and hoping that the people who have always been like there for you are just going to understand, and then they don't. And I think that experience is one that we have a lot. And I'm really curious what you did either actively in that moment or, if as you reflect back, like how did you work through the disappointment of the people that you wanted to understand not understanding?
Hmm. That was a big shift for me, and it's one that continues into present day. So it's actually really great that you asked that, Maggie. I experienced it last night with my husband laying in bed. So it's perfect segue into that of I had to learn that I can't get all of my needs met through my people. And that was the freaking ticket of I am not going to be able to get all of my needs met anymore. And the thing is that little Meg got all of her needs met with her little family, right? With my mom and my brother. I felt like all of my needs were met because we were so unbelievably enmeshed, and in some ways still are. I had to learn that when I went through that long, scary, hard road of beginning to understand what OCD looked like for me and what that meant in my life, I realized that a lot of that road was going to be taken solo, and it had to be. And it built a strength in me that I can't get all of my needs met from these people, and that's not a bad thing. Because I always thought that if I can't get my needs met here, well then this just isn't good, right? This just isn't working out. And I've had to learn that every relationship we have can be beautiful and serves a purpose. And our relationship with ourselves is critical. I remember last night laying in bed with my husband, and I was having it was just a harder night. It was just, sickness and all the things. And I remember like getting into bed and I like, nuzzled into him and I was like, oh, this is like my safest place. And then, and the next breath, this is very Mag, I said, besides myself.
Yeah.
Because that's the reminder to myself that my husband is one of my safest places. I love him. I love being near him. He creates the most safe, warm, beautiful environment for me, just like my mom and brother did. They provided me the most safe, beautiful environment as a little girl. And my safest place is within myself. And I have to keep that in check, and we have to nurture that, because there are so many seasons of life, like for mine, the onset of OCD for me was I couldn't walk through that with others. In fact, if you know anything about OCD, family can really hinder your treatment for OCD in terms of compulsions, and I'll save that for another day if anybody's curious, but it can actually be a really disruptor in your treatment plan of families and relationships. And so there are going to be paths that we have to walk alone or with others next to us, but we still have to do the work ourselves. And so that experience has really taught me that. And it's one that is just a really special part of my life now.
Yeah, I think that that is one of the most important realizations that we can make, is that it's kind of twofold. One, just because I can't get everything from this person doesn't make them bad, right? It
Mm,
doesn't make that relationship worthless. I just have to realize that it does not do everything, and no relationship is going to do everything, right? But also that it's up to us to fill in every gap,
mm,
right? It's always up to us to fill in every gap, whether we do continue to find an external way to do that or we find an internal way to do that. We're still the
mm.
coordinator, right? We're the general contractor of getting our own needs met, right? Whether we do
Yeah.
it ourselves or find someone else to come in and do the job, it's up to us. And the example lover in me would love just one more example, if you want to share, of maybe like what one of those needs you were searching for outside of you was, and then like how you fulfilled it for yourself.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest and probably prominent ones was for me, especially with OCD. It was always, not always, but OCD moves around to a lot of different places in our lives. And for me, it was always the question of, am I okay? And that turned into a lot of medical things for me. It was that's how mine showed up a lot and still does present day is, am I quote unquote okay? And I had to actually walk through that very practically through exposure therapy of, I gotta kind of get more comfortable with the idea that maybe I'm not, right? And I'm not going to go too into detail because it's a little more specialized, but that was one that had to become internal for me of, I can't ask my family, am I okay? Does this look weird? Does this, mark
Mm,
on me look odd? The exposure itself was actually refraining or not allowing myself to do that.
right.
And that is a really hard experience to do, and I still have to do to maintain. But that was a very internal way of being like, I can't necessarily get the validation from out here anymore. So I have no choice but to go inside and become more like capable of saying, even if you're not okay, Meg, you'll handle it if that is the case. Right. And so building that self trust of, even if something is wrong, I have to trust that I will take care of it when that something is wrong. Right. And the key word is the when. Something will go wrong at some point, and I can either sit here all day very scared and anxious and ready for it to happen, which so many of us fall into, and that's a whole other topic. And there is ways to learn how not, if you're listening to this and you're like, yep, that's me. I'm just constantly waiting for things to go wrong. there are ways that you can help yourself through that. And there is a place that you can get to and work towards. I'm really working towards it. Of, I want to trust that when shit does hit the fan, because it will, I trust myself enough to know that I'll handle it when that time comes. And that is that's going to be a lifelong thing to learn, because I am constantly like, yeah, but I'm just going to be ready just in case. That's
Yeah.
constantly my brain. I'm just going to sit here and shake like a little leaf and be skited because I'm ready, everybody.
Oh
Right? The
my
plane,
gosh.
nobody texts back. I don't hear. I'm still in that hypervigilant state a lot of the time, and it is an active freaking thing to be like, you don't have to be here, Meg. You don't have to. What
And
about
that's
for
that.
you? Do you want to share one of
An example of me looking for like validation outside of myself.
external?
Yeah. Let me think. I was just like admiring your mic drop monologue. The brain shut off for a second. Okay.
Oh.
Let's see. I I think one of the biggest things for me where I look for like someone else to tell me I'm doing a good job is with work. I grew up as like, well, I was the valedictorian in high school, so that requires you to get a lot of good grades. And I love me a good sticker on an assignment, you know. A good 100 with a sticker. You got my heart. Okay, you got my heart. And so as I got older, obviously, learned that that's not really how the world works. People don't
Yeah.
really tell you you're doing a good job all the time. You have to just do the job. And then the job is done. And then that means that it was good. Like, that's it. Like, that's all that there is.
And you have to trust that you did the job well,
Yeah,
and somebody trust that they'll tell you if you did it.
exactly. And so this seems like much different than your example, but I had that same sort of anxiety around it. Like that same sort of feeling of like, oh my gosh, did I do a good job? Oh my gosh, am I okay? Oh my gosh, are they mad at me? Are
Mm-hmm.
they, you know, did I fulfill all of their expectations? Do I need to do something differently? You know, and all of those thoughts still race through. And I'm sure there's like a million other examples of ways that I look for this, but this was the first one that came to mind. And I've had to learn, well, first of all, working for yourself really changes that real fast because there literally is nobody else to tell you that you did a good job. But I've had to turn to myself, right? And to look for different measures of like what good means, right? Like what is
Mm-hmm.
good? Like how do I define whether or not I like met the desired outcome,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because meeting a desired outcome of something and it being quote unquote good are not necessarily the same. So I feel like that has been one of the biggest shifts for me that I've had to learn that nobody else could do for me is that how I how I like praise myself first of all has to be more specific, and second of all is only up to me because I'm really the only one that cares. And that's not a bad thing, right? Like we expect everyone else to care so much about what we're doing. And the truth is that nobody cares as much about what you're doing as you do. Like nobody does because they all feel the same way about what they are doing, right? And so I've had to learn that it's up to me to determine whether or not I am satisfied with the thing that I have created. And it's up to me to reward myself for it. Because if I don't reward myself for it, then I will just continuously be in the cycle of feeling like worried about it. Right.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, yeah, I think that that is a different layer of depth of one,
Mm-hmm.
but still relevant.
Extremely. Extremely. And one that I believe, I love that we may have to come back for another episode around this in the future of, it's not always just a person. Sometimes it's an organization or it's an external force in general. And I kind of want to leave you all with another, I really love planting in techniques or tools for you all because, God, I just wish somebody gave me, people do, but I just, it's, who doesn't love a good tool,
The
right?
more, the better.
We're all just trying to make it here. And so the more tools, the merrier. It is a very simple one, but it is one that I believe is so beyond powerful and oftentimes underrated, is little love notes to yourself. It's one that I have used in so many different seasons of my life, but one that I heard Maggie share a couple times throughout the episode of feeling like you're worried what someone may think is a very real thing, right? And it's one that I'm sure a lot of you listening are like, yep, because who doesn't from time to time? But if you're in that, especially like a ton, just constantly, there are ways to help yourself through that. And one of them, the simplest and free way to do this, is to leave yourself a note on the bathroom mirror, in your car, wherever it may be, that maybe is some kind of mantra that says, if they are mad, it is their job to tell me, right? Or I trust myself enough to know that someone will let me know if they're upset. And if they won't, that's not me. That's a long love letter. But think about it for yourself and what applies. But along the lines of like having that self-trust to know that I know that what my intentions are good. And if they didn't come off that way, I trust that someone will tell me and we can have an exchange or whatever it may be. It can just be a really simple way to soften that pressure that we put on ourselves. And it also is a little bit of an exposure, if you will, talking about what I was sharing more of, it's not up to us usually to go and have to ask, hey, did I upset you? Right? And every once in a while, nothing wrong with that. But the problem is that we get caught in that constantly then. And a lot of people will make it a habit of being like, are you mad at me? Or is this, and the problem with that is that it's going to disrupt your day, most likely, if I had to guess. So having something that is more internal, right? But you can see it on the external can be a really great tool to help you through that. It's something that's for you and visible in all the areas.
I love that so much. I definitely do not do that enough. So I need to write myself some more love letters, but I think that is a great place to end this episode. It wraps it up quite nicely. And I think the last thing that I just want to leave you with is that remember that relationships are beautiful and we get to experience them in a lot of beautiful ways. And even when they're hard, we get to learn how to navigate them that in a way that makes it a little bit better for us and in turn a little bit better for everyone else. And so don't forget that. It's all a good time,
And the self-trust of the relationship with yourself is also really valid and important.
Yes,
Thank you all.
it is. Well, thank you for hanging out with us. We will be back next week with another episode of You Can Trust Yourself with Meg and Maggie.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us on another episode of You Can Trust Yourself with Meg and Maggie. Our mission is to leave you with encouragement and tools to nurture your ability to trust yourself. If you found this episode valuable, don't forget to subscribe and please share it with a friend. Then take a moment to leave us a 5-star rating and review. Your support helps our show grow, and for that, we are extremely grateful. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch the episodes. Till next week, lots of trust and love, Meg and Maggie.